Hey everyone, my name is Nathan and welcome to Alfred Hitchcock Month and a happy 123rd birthday to Sir Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense. This is a very exciting video for me. When I created this channel, there are certain goals that I have, a bucket list if you will, for certain videos that I want to come out on this channel and whatnot, and having an Alfred Hitchcock complete filmography ranked video has been the top of that list for as long as I can remember. To be here and to be talking about every single Alfred Hitchcock movie is amazing, and it's surreal, and I cannot believe that I've seen every available movie there is. If you've seen my Twilight Zone ranking video, this is actually going to be very similar to that, where I don't spend a lot of time on the lower ranked movies so that I can spend more time on the higher ranked movies. I'll also separate the movies into different sections, so the bad movies, the decent movies, the good movies, great movies, nearly perfect, or 9 3/4, and perfect. So like I did with the Twilight Zone video, I'd like to give a little background on my experience with Alfred Hitchcock. Now, if you want to skip my background story, just check the bookmarks and go to where the ranking starts. Really hard for people to learn that in the Twilight Zone ranking video, so hopefully it's not as hard for you to learn that here. The first Alfred Hitchcock movie I ever saw was The Birds. My grandparents had a beach house in San Felipe, Mexico, and my earliest memory is watching it at that beach house. Even as a kid, I wasn't really scared of it. I thought it was just a fun movie. I remember thinking it was creepy though. You know, like I wasn't scared. I could go to sleep that night and everything, but it was unsettling, and that was my first dose of Alfred Hitchcock. After that, it's hard to remember precisely which one I watched next, but I want to say that North by Northwest and Dial M for Murder were next on the watch list. The Birds was when I was a little kid, and then when I got older, probably a freshman or sophomore in high school, I started watching more, and I just have a memory of watching North by Northwest and then watching Dial M for Murder. I got really into James Stewart in high school, and I wanted to just see all of his movies. I knew that Alfred Hitchcock was a movie director that he had collaborated with frequently, and so I bought this Blu-ray box set when I was in high school. A vast majority of his movies are in this collection, including all the James Stewart ones. So I bought it with the thought process of, you know, I like Alfred Hitchcock, really just want to watch the James Stewart movies, and maybe I'll check out a few other Alfred Hitchcock movies because I like him. I want to get more into him. One thing led to the next. I watched every James Stewart movie. I liked all of them, I remember. This box set just led me from one movie to the next. The whole journey has been several years. The more and more I watched Alfred Hitchcock, the more intrigued I got. The more I started recognizing his key signature filmmaking styles. I was so interested that I started watching interviews with him, and I started listening to how he talked about movies. And it was interesting for me because I'm not going into a film career, yet I was mentally taking notes. I was thinking, oh, that makes sense that he does it that way. That makes sense that he prefers to show the audience and not tell the audience. I love that. Little things like that where he just really intrigued me. I started reading books as well. If you're looking for the best book out there, I would say it's Hitchcock by Truffaut. I have marked my notes in it, and I have plenty of pages marked and highlighted, but it's a very good book, and it's where Alfred Hitchcock spends time talking about every movie that he made. It is so cool hearing from him. He denies facts. Like, for an example, there's a rumor that his favorite movie he made was Shadow of a Doubt, and in this book he denies that rumor. So little things like that, it's just really cool hearing from him, the master of suspense himself. I'm talking a lot. I need to move on to the ranking, but I just want to give you guys an idea of why I love Alfred Hitchcock so much. He is my favorite movie director of all time, which is why this is a pretty momentous occasion. There's just something about watching his movies, whether it's suspenseful or a comedy. I love looking out for his cameo. I love that whenever I revisit a movie, despite having seen it numerous times, my heart still races at those suspenseful scenes. And that's why he deserves that title of Master of Suspense. This first section is going to be for the bad movies. And before I start on the ranking, I should mention that his complete filmography is actually unavailable to view. He has at least 2 movies that I know of that are no longer in existence because they were destroyed or lost, whatever it was, but they're not available to watch. He also collaborated with some directors and made some short films as well. None of those will be included in this ranking. These are just movies that he directed on his own that are still available. My count is 52. So with that being said, number 52, Juno and the Paycock. This was the hardest one to watch simply because it's so boring and it's just uninteresting. The movie runs at an hour and a half but feels way slower. The story should mean something, but it actually falls very flat, rich and strange. Emphasis on the strange. The couple in this movie have no rules when it comes to having a good time, even if it means openly cheating on each other. The story is pretty silly and ends with a sinking ship and accidentally eating a cat. Number 50, Waltzes from Vienna. Seeing a young Edmund Gwenn is my favorite thing about Waltzes from Vienna. I love how we end on a note that shows Gwenn's character accepting his son's dreams. I was mostly just annoyed at the characters in the movie and how entitled they were. Alright, so that's it for the movies that I would consider bad. We're now going into a category of Dece or decent movies. 49, The Manxman. This movie has the most oblivious characters of any Hitchcock movie, namely Carl Brissom's character. It's just so blatantly obvious his wife is cheating on him and he doesn't pick up on any of it. He also has quite the punchable face. Number 48, Easy Virtue. It's just plain boring, but at least it's good enough to be better than the previously mentioned ones. I saw this movie 2 years ago, I don't remember much from it, and I don't have a desire to watch it again either. So that kind of is a review on its own. Number 47, Number 17. This is probably the only Alfred Hitchcock movie that I would say is so bad that it's just good, because it's fun to watch. There are just a lot of laughable moments, including fake punches, twist upon twist, and a very obvious use of toy trains. Now, the use of toy trains is not a con to the movie by any means. In fact, I actually kind of appreciate it when I recognize older movies with toy trains, or when you see a plane and you can clearly see the wires attached to the plane. It just makes me smile. Number 46, Champagne. The best scene about this movie involves a ship moving back and forth because the waves are hitting it. Obviously, the passengers are holding on, or they're falling over, they're barely standing up, and then in walks a drunk man who walks in a perfectly straight line, completely unfazed by the violent sea. Very clever there. Number 45 is probably my first hot take of the list. It is Frenzy. When it comes to Frenzy, I'm just not a big fan of the story. It has its Hitchcock moments, which of course I appreciate, but it's not marketing anything else to me particularly. Probably an even bigger hot take, but I just prefer Alfred Hitchcock when he had to work under a censor. I know that sounds crazy, but I think it made him more creative with how he got away with things and how he presented the movie all around. And so with Frenzy having such free reign, it didn't feel like an Alfred Hitchcock movie as much. It did have suspenseful scenes, but in the end, it didn't feel like it was him making it. 44, Under Capricorn. I can't help but appreciate the long shots. Many times Under Capricorn is overshadowed by Rope, Hitchcock's other long take movie, and while Rope is a lot better, you can't help but still just appreciate Under Capricorn. Its biggest weakness is that it's very slow moving, even despite having a very good ending. Number 43, The Ring. Besides being super dated, I really liked the boxing here. It's just fun seeing boxing in such an old movie, one that's almost 100 years old. I will say that the wife in this movie, Mabel, is super dislikable and annoying. She gets mad at her husband because he gets mad at her because she's cheating on him. She's cheating on him so obviously that she even has a photo of the man she's having an affair with on display in their house. What? Makes no sense. Number 42 is Blackmail. I've only seen the silent version of this movie, but I do plan to watch the talkie someday. The standout to the movie may very well be Hitchcock's cameo. So much time is spent on it. Normally, Hitchcock just walks across the screen, but the fact that you see him for such a long time, and it's also really funny too, it is one of my favorite cameos he ever made. The movie itself is good too. Even though it's really old, it still has that signature Alfred Hitchcock style. Plus, it has a pretty fun chase scene at the end. 41. Downhill. Despite being very melodramatic, I still enjoyed this early Hitchcock silent film just because I can't help but appreciate it. I loved how all the night sequences were blue, the day sequences were kind of a sepia tone, and then certain nightmare sequences were green. It just added on to the story and made it a more atmospheric, enjoyable tale to watch. Number 40, The Skin Game. Like I mentioned with Waltzes from Vienna, the best thing about The Skin Game is actually Edmund Gwenn being in it. I always like when he pops up on a movie. I have a soft spot for him after seeing him in Miracle on 34th Street playing Santa Claus. But other than that, the movie is very melodramatic, and the best scene it has going for it is a pretty intense auction scene. I will say though that I was not expecting the ending that this movie had. It gave the movie a lot more of a serious tone, and I appreciated that. Okay, we are now in the category of good movies. Number 39, The Pleasure Garden. This was Alfred Hitchcock's directorial debut, which is super exciting. There's a sequence with a ghost haunting that I really enjoyed. Just some quick speed round thoughts. Jill is a tool, and the dog is very wise and cute as well. The Farmer's Wife. The movie's plot is pretty ridiculous. A woman is dying, but before she dies, she asks that her husband finds a wife that can replace her. So he's basically, the whole movie, he's choosing who his wife will be. It's a pretty goofy plot, but I actually laughed at it a few times, and I was touched by the ending too. Number 37, Murder. This movie got away with a lot of things that it would not have been able to get away with in a coded era. I really appreciated just certain shots in this movie. There's one scene where you see the shadow of a gallows just rising up, and it's very eerie. It feels way ahead of its time, and there's a certain shot at the end of the movie that is still stuck in my head. Number 36, Jamaica Inn. For a Hitchcock movie, it's not the best, but as a Charles Laughton fan, I had a really fun time. He plays a very exuberant character, pretty ridiculous. The movie is honestly kind of dumb, but I really like seeing Charles Laughton. Charles Laughton made 2 movies with Alfred Hitchcock, and funny enough, ranked at number 35, I have The Paradine Case. This movie was good enough because it was a courtroom movie, and I love courtroom movies, but I will say, don't have too high of expectations. I was kind of hoping for a big twist, and when the end actually happened, I was just underwhelmed. I was expecting something better, and the result I got was just kind of like, oh, Well, okay, I could have told you that. Secret Agent. This movie is all about espionage, but don't get too excited. I could have done for a little more suspense. I did like seeing them visit a chocolate factory because I'm secretly Willy Wonka. And like I mentioned with the toy trains earlier, I really appreciated the toy train crash. But there's a very unexpected and unnecessary death at the end, and it feels like it just happened because they needed to kill someone off to make you feel for it. I don't think it was necessary at all. Number 33, Topaz. Topaz left me quite conflicted because the movie had scenes where I was like, yes, this is screaming Alfred Hitchcock, and I love what I'm watching here. But then I had other times where it just wasn't interesting. The movie moved along at a pretty boring speed, and I didn't find the main character that interesting, honestly. There's a really cool video that I will link in the description below that talks about how every Alfred Hitchcock movie has a MacGuffin, or in other words, something to move the plot along that actually doesn't play too big of a role in the movie. For example, in Psycho, the MacGuffin would be the money that is stolen. The video that I'm referencing talks all about how the main character in this movie, he's the MacGuffin of the movie, and that's why he's not very fascinating, because every other character you see is more fascinating than him. And I think that it was a very good take, and I agree with what he said. Number 32 is The Lady Vanishes. This is a movie that I think might rank higher in the future upon rewatches. I have seen it twice, and so I don't feel too bad for ranking it this low because I have a generally good idea of how I feel about the movie, but there are still a lot of things to appreciate. I like just the uncertainty of the movie. I like the mystery. You're wondering the whole time, where did the lady go? The lady vanished. Where is she? And you realize as the movie goes along, there's more and more people involved with the plot of her missing, and it's exciting to watch. Number 31 is Suspicion. This is the first Cary Grant movie that makes it onto the list. I will give it some points for how ambiguous it ends. I really appreciate that. To me, it's very clear what the answer is. I won't spoil it here, but if you want to hear my thoughts, leave comments below and I can talk more about it there. It just was kind of hard to watch because there are some moments that are like really exciting and you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, Cary Grant is a murderer trying to kill her. And then there are other moments where it's like, wait, is this supposed to be a comedy? What am I watching here? But I guess that's kind of like Hitchcock in a nutshell, really. All right, so we are officially in the category of what I find to be great Hitchcock movies. Number 30 is Sabotage. I'm going to say some spoilers for Sabotage, so if you don't want to hear it, just skip to the next movie I'll talk about. This movie is very famous for having a death of a child. He is on a bus and the bus blows up. This is something that Hitchcock regretted, and he even said later in his career that if he were to redo that movie, he would not have included that scene. But for what it's worth, I think that scene is actually really risky, and I actually appreciate it a lot. It was so well done with the suspense. You know that the bomb is ticking. You know that the bomb's going to go off. So very well executed. In addition to that, after the kid dies, the sister, the older sister of the kid, she's seeing visions of him. Like she can't get over that he died and she's blaming herself, and it's just really well done. It surprised me of how much I liked it. I thought it would just be kind of a, all right, let's watch another Hitchcock movie so I can check it off the list, but it meant a lot to me. So much so that I would call it great. 29 is Torn Curtain with Paul Newman and Julie Andrews. Not gonna lie, this one shouldn't be as great as I say it is. However, it has a bus chase sequence that I was glued to the screen for. The rest of the movie has some cool sequences and some fun scenes that are exciting and that definitely feel like Alfred Hitchcock, but unfortunately, there's not a lot of them. There are a lot of slow moving scenes. It feels like the movie takes forever to get itself established, and so I'm really just giving the points to it because of the exciting bus chase scene at the end. Number 28 is a silent film from him. Alfred Hitchcock claims this to be the very first Hitchcock movie. And so I mentioned movies that were made before this, but this was the first movie that he felt, yes, this is my style, this is what people should compare me to, kind of thing. It is The Lodger. The Lodger is exciting, it's mysterious, and it has a really cool sequence where someone's pacing back and forth upstairs, and as the residents below look up, the way Hitchcock filmed it was as if he was walking on glass, and so they're seeing through the floor and seeing him pacing back and forth. Because it's a silent film, they can't audibly tell you that he's pacing back and forth and that the residents below recognize it, and so instead they have the residents look up and they see him walking back and forth, but it's telling us, okay, they hear him walking back and forth. He's pacing, that means he's suspicious about something. A little scene, but I really like it. And it's my favorite silent film from him too. 27 is The 39 Steps. This is Alfred Hitchcock's classic The Innocent Man is on the Run story, where someone is accused of something that they didn't do. He does it multiple times in his career, but this was one of the earliest times he did it. Might have even been the earliest. The movie just has a lot of little scenes that I really appreciate. One that I'll note here is a scene where a woman finds a dead body, and as she opens her mouth to scream, it cuts to a train blowing its whistle, and so it sounds like the whistle's coming out of her. Just really clever, and I liked it a lot. Lifeboat is a really fun movie because since it is in one location, you have to really entertain the audience, and I think that Hitchcock successfully does this through the characters that are involved and that are in the lifeboat. For being in a lifeboat the whole movie, it can be dangerously boring, but it actually is pretty entertaining and it moves at a good pace, and I will also give it credits for the amazing Alfred Hitchcock cameo. Alright, and we are in the top 25. Number 25 is the 1934 The Man Who Knew Too Much. One thing that the original has on the remake is Peter Lorre as the villain, because I constantly forget who the villain even is in the remake. That's how forgettable he is. Whereas the original one, the only thing I remember is how good Peter Lorre is and just how menacing he looks. There's a lot to appreciate about this one though. I just think that the remake does a lot better. 24 is Young and Innocent. This is one of the earliest examples of Alfred Hitchcock doing a long take. There's one particular scene where you are looking for a man who has a twitch in this huge ballroom, and the camera starts far away and slowly is zooming forward to this man who has the twitch, but there's never a cut. It goes straight to this man, and back in the day, that was not an easy thing to accomplish. And so that's the standout for me in this movie in particular. Really appreciated that scene, and I just thought it was really well done. Stage Fright is a smaller movie from Alfred Hitchcock that not a lot of people know about, but there are still plenty of moments that have my heart racing, and a lot of suspenseful moments as well. I would say that from the time that Alfred Hitchcock makes his cameo to the end of the movie, it's just pure excitement. There's also a very funny sequence where the character of Eve is in a disguise, and she wants to make sure her disguise works by testing it out on a friend without telling her that it's her. And right away the friend's like, oh hey Eve, and it's just really funny how fast that failed. The Wrong Man is the only collaboration between Henry Fonda and Alfred Hitchcock, and though it's a slower moving movie, I still really appreciated it. It also has Vera Miles in it, and she does an amazing job. It might even be the standout of the movie. This is also Alfred Hitchcock's only movie that's based off of true story. Rather than make a cameo in this movie, he has a little introduction that says, "This is a true story." That was an awful impersonation. I will say though, this one doesn't really feel like an Alfred Hitchcock movie. If anything, it kind of felt like a Sidney Lumet movie. There was never really any big scene that had suspense to it. It just is a slow moving movie that accomplishes stuff, but it didn't really feel like a Hitchcock movie. Marnie started off very intriguing. It's a female con artist in the 60s, always conning her bosses and stealing money from them, which is really fascinating and cool. And even within the first few minutes, there's a suspenseful scene where she's about to get caught. But then it just kind of digresses. The whole movie, there are very mysterious attributes with Marnie. You're wondering why she has the fear of the color red, and you're wondering why certain things happen the way they do. And then when it's finally revealed why, it's a little underwhelming. Number 20, we have To Catch a Thief, a more underrated Hitchcock movie that's also not his most underrated movie. It's really fun seeing Cary Grant and Grace Kelly team up together. It was the only time that they did that with Alfred Hitchcock, and ever, I think. The movie is exactly what it sounds like. They're trying to catch a thief. Cary Grant is accused of being that thief, but the movie goes on and stuff happens. I don't want to say too much more about this movie, but I will just say that I really appreciated the aesthetic of it. Very colorful. The way the night scenes were shot were also very cool to me. Number 19 is the last movie that Alfred Hitchcock made, and it's the last movie I had to watch to complete his filmography. That is Family Plot. This is my favorite movie from Alfred Hitchcock after The Birds, which is saying a bit. He made quite a few movies, and for his last movie, some people thought he had lost his touch, but I think he definitely still had his touch. It's a movie that has plenty of funny moments. Sure, it has some dumb moments too, but it also has those suspenseful moments that I really want in an Alfred Hitchcock movie. Barbara Harris is the standout to me. She plays this psychic, and I just think she does a really good job in this role. Final 30 minutes had my heart racing, it had me glued to the screen, and I loved that final moment of the movie. Number 18 is The Trouble with Harry. A lot of people bash on The Trouble with Harry because it's a comedy and it doesn't feel like Hitchcock, but I think this movie is great. Yes, it's funnier, but it's also screaming Alfred Hitchcock. The fact that people stumble upon a dead body and they don't know what to do with it, and the whole movie is deciding what do we do with this dead body, that just screams Alfred Hitchcock with his dark sense of humor. I also like that the movie isn't just said and done. It's not like, oh, I killed this person, now I have to get rid of the body so I don't get in trouble. There are constantly new things that you are learning as an audience member that it's like, oh. Yes, it's goofy, but it also has Edmund Gwenn. My number 17 movie is Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Hey, it's me, hot take, I'm back. People don't like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and I guess I understand why, because it's not an Alfred Hitchcock movie. There's not one remote hint of suspense or thrill or anything like that. It's a pure rom-com, honestly. With that being said, I laughed several moments. There was one scene that I actually laughed really hard at. That's pretty rare for a black and white movie. Don't get me wrong, I love black and white movies, but the sense of humor in a black and white movie doesn't always make me laugh hard. The fact that Mr. and Mrs. Smith had that scene that made me laugh, and I still remember it to this day, it earns some points. If you've seen the movie, it has to do with a scene where a man is at a restaurant and he's pretending to talk to the woman next to him. Hilarious stuff. It also had a very goofy soundtrack. Every time it played this certain track, I would just laugh to myself because I thought it was so silly. So yeah, I have it at number 17. What are you gonna do? Number 16 is Saboteur, which has a lot of good things, and then it has Robert Cummings. I'm not the biggest fan of Robert Cummings. I don't like him as an actor. He also is in Dial M for Murder, and he's in a Twilight Zone episode. I've never enjoyed him in what I see him in. I just don't think the guy can act. And unfortunately, he's the main character in this movie. But with that aside, I do really appreciate this movie. I like the villain's motives in this movie. The villain's kind of has the motive of, we want to cause chaos because we can cause chaos. It reminded me of the Joker from The Dark Knight. Plus, it has a very exciting scene at the end involving the Statue of Liberty, which I really appreciated. All right, we are in my top 15. Number 15 goes to I Confess. I Confess is Montgomery Clift and Alfred Hitchcock's only outing together, probably for good reason. I know that Hitchcock had a very hard time working with Montgomery Clift because he's such a method actor. For an example, Hitchcock would say, okay, you're gonna walk out of this building, then you're gonna look up. I need you to look up. And Clift would say, okay, but would my character look up? Like, why would he have the drive to look up? And Hitchcock was dumbfounded. He's like, what are you talking about? Just look up. Just do what I say. I'm the director. Very entertaining to read Hitchcock talk about this movie. But besides them not getting along very well, I really like the movie. It's about a priest who receives a confession that someone murdered another man, and under the oaths he made to become a priest, he cannot reveal that confession to anyone. So when the cops come and ask who the murderer is, he can't say who it is because that would go against what he believes. In addition to that, he starts becoming suspected for the murder, and he knows that he wasn't it. I mean, obviously, but he can't tell people that. So it places him in this predicament where, do I choose faith in my religion, or do I choose law and the truth? I really liked it, and it had me wondering how it was going to end, so very entertaining watch. Number 14, the one that started it all, it is The Birds. The Birds is not a scary movie in the slightest, but it doesn't mean that it's not a great time. Yes, it's very cheesy, but you can't help but just appreciate it. I like how the movie begins with just one little bird pecking at Tippi Hedren, and then by the end of it, there's just flocks of bird everywhere. The standout scene for me in this movie is definitely the schoolhouse scene where Tippi Hedren is smoking, and it cuts from her to the playground to her, and then she turns around and suddenly there are just a ton of birds there. You also can't help but appreciate all the techniques that went into filming this movie, like how they have a green screen with birds flying around everywhere. I just really appreciate this movie, and because it was the first Alfred Hitchcock movie I ever saw, it definitely holds a special place in my heart too. Number 13, I can't believe I'm saying this, it's Rebecca. I have seen Rebecca 3 times in my life. And the first time I saw it, I thought, this is the only Hitchcock movie to have won Best Picture. I also thought, just in general, this won Best Picture. Also, this is a Hitchcock movie. I just wasn't impressed with it. I saw it again and I still felt that way. It wasn't until a third time watching that I really enjoyed it and I find it to be a great movie. And I'm very intrigued to see if it can eventually become just that perfect movie that people claim it to be. Joan Fontaine, I mean, she's a bit of a melodramatic actress, but I actually really like her in here. The standout though is Judith Anderson as Mrs. Danvers. Wow, does she give a creepy performance. She's just so unsettling and creepy to Mrs. De Winter. I really like her performance here. And I like the ending too. I just think it's a very well done movie. I admit it, it's a great movie. Come on. Let's move on. All right, we are in the category of movies of 9 3/4, or in other words, they're nearly perfect. They don't quite have that 10 out of 10, but man, they are so close, and someday they very well may have that 10. Starting it out is number 12, Foreign Correspondent. There's just a lot I appreciate about Foreign Correspondent. 3 particular scenes. The one involving the umbrellas, the one involving the windmill, and the one involving the plane at the end. Each of those scenes are amazing and reasons alone that you should watch this movie. Please watch it. It is a more underrated Hitchcock movie, and I hope that it being ranked at number 12 is reason enough for you to watch it. The next movie is Spellbound, and if I could choose any criterion to get an upgrade from DVD to Blu-ray, it would be Spellbound. I don't really know why they haven't done this yet. It doesn't make sense. It deserves it. It's an amazing movie. The reason it's amazing, besides the fact that it has Gregory Peck and Ingrid Bergman, 2 stars that I really like, is because it has a very mysterious story to it, where you're just wanting answers. You don't want Gregory Peck to be the villain that he's made out to be. You're rooting for him to have a good ending. The way the movie gets to the ending and the dream sequences it shows and the little hints that it shows of Gregory Peck's past, it's just all culminated into one movie. I'm so surprised that this movie isn't talked about more. It really is good. All right, everyone, you made it. My top 10. Starting out at number 10, I have The Man Who Knew Too Much, the remake. I touched on this earlier, but I just think the remake did everything but the villain better than the original. Doris Day gives possibly the best female performance of any Alfred Hitchcock movie. You care about the characters more. You care about the son. You know the parents better. You have a better idea of who they are, that they have careers. He's a doctor. She's a professional singer. These are just things that you don't know when you watch the original one, and it makes you care less about them in a way. But here the plot is just more detailed, and the characters have much better development as well. And the scene at the concert hall is absolutely amazing. Not only my favorite part of The Man Who Knew Too Much, but one of my favorite Alfred Hitchcock scenes ever. Number 9, I have North by Northwest, a movie that I wasn't too big of a fan of the first time I saw it, but upon each rewatch, I really enjoy it. North by Northwest really is the perfect innocent man on the run movie. You have moments that you laugh at, you have moments where you're wondering what's going to happen next. It's a pretty wacky plot, and I don't know if this is a hot take, but I actually prefer the first hour of it to the last hour. I just like the uncertainty. When it starts to kind of reveal more and more what the story is doing and the direction they're going in, it's not bad by any means, but I just like the opening where you're like, why are they accusing Cary Grant of something he didn't do? And just one unfortunate thing happens after another. It's just fun to watch, and Cary Grant is amazing here. Although this isn't my highest rated Cary Grant film, it's probably my favorite performance of his. Number 8 is your favorite movie that you like to say Alfred Hitchcock claimed to be his favorite movie. It is Shadow of a Doubt. I love this movie. I mean, it's so fun seeing Teresa Wright. She's so adorable. I love anytime she pops up into a movie. It's just so fun following her character as she's slowly finding more and more out about her uncle, who was once her hero, and she's discovering that he's not that good of a hero. He's not really the example and role model that she thought he was. It has those suspenseful scenes that I live for in a Hitchcock film. There really isn't too much wrong with it. This is one of those movies that I was talking about where the more and more I see it in the upcoming years, it's going to get that 10 out of 10 someday. Bonus points for including Henry Travers, who is Clarence the Angel in It's a Wonderful Life. Number 7 is Strangers on a Train. This is another underrated Alfred Hitchcock movie that kind of gets overshadowed by his more popular movies, which I guess is exactly what underrated means. I really, really enjoy this movie. It's in that same tier of Shadow of the Doubt where I'm sure that it's going to make that 10 out of 10 status someday, but right now it's just at that 9. I just love Bruno. I love how psychotic he is, how crazy he is. He's creepy. I love that he's a stalker and the unsettling feeling you get anytime he's on the screen. He really steals the show. I mean, Farley Granger does a good job as well, but Robert Walker as Bruno, I mean, he does it. He's amazing. There's one scene where a tennis match is going on and you're watching everyone's heads move back and forth, watching the tennis ball. And while all the heads are moving, Bruno is just staring directly at Farley Granger's character. And it's just chilling. There's also a murder scene in this movie that is so well done. You see a murder happen in the reflection of a pair of glasses, and it's intense. It's not normally categorized as a horror movie, and it's not a horror movie, but it's definitely creepy, and that's a big reason I really like it. All right, and with my top 6, we are now in the perfect Alfred Hitchcock movies. Now, I'm definitely not limiting this to 6 permanently. I know that there will be more perfect Alfred Hitchcock movies that get that 10 out of 10 as I've mentioned before, but as of today, as of this ranking, my top 6, number 6 is Notorious. Not only is this my favorite Cary Grant and Hitchcock movie, it's my favorite Cary Grant movie, my favorite Ingrid Bergman movie. I love the plot. How Ingrid Bergman is undercover trying to get more information to help the United States. I love that there are plenty of suspenseful scenes where she's about to get caught. Specifically, the scene that you see on the Criterion cover where she has the key and she's hiding the key. The shot that I talked about earlier in Young and Innocent is replicated here where you zoom in from top of the staircase instead of in the ballroom and you're going down to Ingrid Bergman's hand to focus on the key. Plus, Ingrid Bergman and Cary Grant have great chemistry. I can't wait for more watches in the future. Dial M for Murder is so well done. You get Grace Kelly, Ray Milland, both giving great performances. Notice how I didn't mention Robert Cummings. I don't like him in this movie, again. So Dial M for Murder is all about Ray Milland, a husband who is aware of his wife, Grace Kelly, having an affair on him. So he wants to murder her. He wants to be completely innocent of it, so he's not going to pull out the murder. He's hiring someone to murder her for him. However, when the plan doesn't go the way it was supposed to, he has to scramble and change his cover. The great thing about Dial M for Murder is everything that leads up to the murder scene itself and how suspenseful that is, and then everything after. So really just the whole movie is amazing. But the only reason it's lower than the top 3 is I think that the ending conclusion comes a little too fast, and Robert Cummings' character specifically is just a little bit too attentive and aware of things that it doesn't make sense that he's as knowledgeable about the facts as he actually is. But I still really like the movie, and it's very rewatchable as well. Number 4, I have Vertigo. James Stewart, Kim Novak, I'm wearing a sweatshirt. Vertigo is the epitome of an Alfred Hitchcock movie that has to be rewatched. I have this saying, Alfred Hitchcock movies are always better on a rewatch. And Vertigo is the trophy child of that saying, because the first time I saw it, I didn't dislike it, but I think I was a little confused of why it was so hyped. Granted, I was also a high schooler, so I didn't appreciate movies then as much as I do now. But every time I rewatch Vertigo, I take something new out of it. I remember things that I had forgotten from the previous viewing. I appreciate a scene more than I did in the previous viewing. I understand characters more than I did previously. It's just a movie that I feel like I'm learning something every time that I revisit it. In fact, even talking now about it, I want to watch it right now. The nightmare sequence that James Stewart has is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Alfred Hitchcock scene in his whole filmography. It's really hard to choose a favorite. It's so hard to choose a favorite, but I just want to emphasize that I love the nightmare sequence in Vertigo. I also love the romance to it. Maybe not the best relationship, but good at least portraying romance in the movie. Overall, Vertigo is just a masterpiece. I don't know what else to say. I love it. Number 3 is Rope. I just released a 12-minute video about how much I love Rope, so I won't spend too much time here talking about it, but I will just briefly say I love the long shots. I love James Stewart's character, Rupert, how he's slowly catching on to Philip and Brandon's lie, and I love that it takes place in real time, that we are there for the conversations. We are watching time tick as it happens, and I really like that. And my number 2 movie, it is Rear Window. Rear Window is a movie that I'm getting giddy just saying the title because that's how much I love Rear Window. I love the way it opens, how we get a jazzy theme at the beginning, but then the rest of the movie, the only music we hear is what is playing in the neighborhood. I love how we're thrown right into L.B. Jeffries' apartment. We see a very lively neighborhood from the very beginning, and everything is established so well. Like Rope, really my whole top 3 I have separate videos about, but I'll still spend time because that's what you're here for. Rear Window has just a lot of fun scenes. I think that it takes its time to build suspense and to get the audience invested and excited to watch it, but then when you finally do get to those scenes that are suspenseful and that are nerve-wracking and that have you screaming at your screen no matter how many times you've seen it, they pay off significantly. Rabin Burr as the mysterious neighbor who is suspected of murdering his wife just does an absolutely amazing job here. He's just good at playing a creepy guy. I saw this back in high school and I remember even thinking like, ooh, this guy's like, he's creepy. He gives off bad vibes. Grace Kelly is as beautiful as ever. There's a scene particularly that involves her in the home of the accused murderer, and that's one of the most exciting scenes of the movie. I was almost going to say it's the most exciting scene, but then I remembered the very end, and that's probably more exciting. Rear Window is one that I cherish. It's something that means a lot to me. Not only my favorite James Stewart and Alfred Hitchcock movie, but one of my favorite James Stewart movies, one of my favorite movies of all time as well. I had a chance to see it in the theaters, and it was so exciting to see that in the movie theaters. I love it so much, and I'm glad to have it ranked this high on the list. Coming in at number 1 is Alfred Hitchcock's most popular movie, and normally I would be ashamed to have my number 1 be the most popular movie, but I cannot deny for a second that this is my favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie. It is Psycho. This is probably the movie I've studied the most up on in history. I don't think there's any other movie that I have read about more. I've watched documentaries, 7852. He talks about it in the documentary Hitchcock Truffaut, of course. I've also seen the movie Hitchcock with Anthony Hopkins and Helen Mirren. It's all about their relationship while they filmed the movie Psycho. Plus, I read the original Psycho novel. I read a book by Janet Leigh that talks all about her experience in making Psycho. And then in addition to that, I've also seen it in the movie theaters. I've watched it multiple times in the same year. No matter how many times I've seen Psycho, my heart will always skip a beat when Marion Crane first arrives to the Bates Motel. There's just something about the music already being so exciting and unsettling from Bernard Herrmann, and then it leading to a silent scene where you only hear rain pouring on the car and you just see Bates Motel vacancy. It's quite an interesting experience with Psycho. I never watched it not knowing the twist. Even the first time I ever saw it, I knew how it ended and everything, yet that didn't deter me from loving it. It doesn't deter me from loving it now, however many times I've seen it. The black and white cinematography greatly complements it. Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates gives an incredible performance. It might be my favorite performance of any Alfred Hitchcock Hitchcock movie, no, I think I'll go ahead and say that it is my favorite performance of any Alfred Hitchcock movie. Like Rope and Rear Window, I have a separate video all about why I love Psycho so much, and so I'll let you watch that for more details. For now, I do want to announce that it is my favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie. Guys, thank you so much for joining me and watching a video that was a dream to make. I always wanted to make this video, and filming it right now in my bedroom, talking to a video camera, 10:30 at night, I still can't believe that I've actually completed his filmography and that I'm talking to a crowd on YouTube that also appreciates Alfred Hitchcock. I would love to hear your rankings, whether that be the complete filmography or the movies you have seen, whatever it may be. Please leave your comments in the comment section below. And just because the complete ranking is out for Alfred Hitchcock does not mean that Alfred Hitchcock month is over. So stay tuned to watch the other videos that come out. The next video will be on August 19th, and it'll be all about Alfred Hitchcock and Alma Reville's relationship. I'm excited for that one to come, but until then, happy birthday today to Alfred Hitchcock, happy birthday tomorrow to his wife Alma, and I'll see you on the 19th.